Ni hao. Welcome to this edition of DURKO's Notebook for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. After that weekend of racing, there's a shit ton of stuff I want to talk about and get off my chest. Anyway, better get on with the show. Pull up a pew, sit back, relax and enjoy the show. You wouldn't fucking read about it. So following a 5-year absence, we've returned to the Herman Tilke designed Shanghai International Circuit, and despite its location, all the history, the politics, the discussion you can have about China as a country, I think this is one of the best circuits that Herman Tilke's ever designed. I think it's a great challenge, great layout. It's a long straights, tight corners, bit of a drop in through the first couple of turns, and always turns on a great race. So a lot of action over the weekend, of course, with the return of the sprint race format. FP1, the only thing I found interesting was Gasly and Sargent fighting over the same piece of real estate and trying to blame each other for getting in each other's way. But when you're at the back of the grid, I suppose any chance to get in front of somebody else is always a good opportunity. So that was a bit of a bizarre incident. They're always blaming each other. For the sprint quali, Norris's time was deleted because they determined that he breached the track limits. And then about a lap later, they reinstated that time originally. And the reason for reinstating it was given that he had made no gain from actually going outside the track limit. Because that last turn, they've now installed a gravel trap, which used to be actual grass, and the gravel trap's now a real deterrent for them to stop going wide. So a bit of a bizarre one that gave Toto Wolff obviously a confused look left on his face once that had happened, because he was fighting with Hamilton for pole in the sprint. The sprint race, now I've never usually been a general fan of it overall, but for this weekend it changed my mind only because there was some shit-hot racing, really good tight racing between all the drivers. We saw the Trulli train come back in sort of the back of the midfield at least, and the big discussion point, of course, was the coming together of Sainz and Leclerc. Now, it's apparent that Sainz has gone wide into the corner. It's not like he's understeered or drifted into him. He's just taken a very white line and pushed Leclerc off. Now, Kim Illman reported in his video wrap-up that it's general knowledge around the paddock that Sainz and Leclerc have not been getting on for a period of time now, and it's all been kept in-house, so to speak, and resolved in-house between them to clear the air. But there was some very different opinions between Leclerc and Sainz after the debrief after the sprint races to who'd actually cleared up the air with each other, because Sainz didn't seem to think that anything was actually ratified or cleared up at all, whereas Leclerc said, no, it's all good, we're right to go. But I'm not saying defence for Sainz, but obviously he's a bloke who's out of the drive next year at Ferrari, and he's got nothing to lose, as I keep saying, by trying to show what he can do as a driver to get himself planted into a seat for next year. He's just got to sell himself, and that's all he's got to do. But clearly he doesn't give a shit about team rules or principles anymore, or whatever Freddie says to him, mate, you need to toe this corporate line, because he's no longer a company man. It is apparent. So getting on with the actual qualifying, Sainz had a weird spin. He obviously got caught out in the last turn and stuck his Ferrari into the wall. He only busted the nose off. There was no real damage to the car. I thought he might have done more to the gearbox, the rear end, but he hadn't. Now, that caused a red flag. Now, this is where the interesting thing comes into it, because once he limped, he was able to restart the car, and the car stalled. Using the hybrid system and the battery power, he was able to restart the car under its own juice, its own steam. He was able to limp it back with no front end back to the garage, where they've the chief mechanic's done a once-over and said, yeah, you're right to go. Here's a new front wing. Several minutes later, they've obviously restarted that qualifying session. Obviously, at the end of it, Sainz did qualify pretty well overall, and Aston Martin appealed that because they thought it was unfair that he was able to continue in the qualifying session after he had actually stopped the car. But that appeal was thrown out. On to the race itself. This is where it gets interesting, because Bottas obviously stopped his car, his engine died, his gearbox shit itself, I believe, because he got stuck in second gear. And while there was still a live circuit, he's actually jumped out of the car. Now, a lot of people were saying, why was there no immediate VFC why wasn't the safety car not deployed? Why did they not red flag it when the driver's out of the car? To potentially, in the interest of safety for Bottas and also the marshals trying to retrieve that Sauber car. So it was a weird one that they didn't take more action sooner, I guess. Gasly, he had a shit pit stop. It was a delay getting the right rear on. He almost ran over one of the mechanics. Alonso had a big moment. He came out of the last turn sideways. It was a lot of action coming out of that last turn. So he was able to get a fistful of opposite lock and hang on to the Aston Martin, so he didn't lose it. Now the weird one was under the safety car. Obviously, later on there was a safety car incident, and Sargent came down the down the main straight, obviously at full pelt as fast as he could pedal his Williams. Hulkenberg's in the Haas coming out of the pits. Now, as this photo shows from a graphic from F1's own videos that Sam Collins did explaining it, Hulkenberg has been told clearly by the team that there is a Williams coming down the main straight, but he physically can't see because of the build, the design of the pit lane exit and so forth, so he can't physically see it. And it turns out that Sargent was about 20 to 30 centimetres off the safety car line when the Hulk's got just in front of him. And because of Sargent just carrying all that speed, he's overtaken the Hulk, and he's got a penalty for it. I mean, some say it was a stupid penalty. Yeah, look, maybe it was a bit too harsh, but a penalty's a penalty. But the problem is he wasn't told to give the place back, which Sargent said he would do if he'd known about it during the actual race. He was penalised after the race, which was added to the stupidity of it. But the problem is, why doesn't that line continue right across to the pit exit lane? So it can be better defined for the drivers as to know where the line is, because the line is only on the actual circuit, not on the pit exit lane. So Hulk's got no idea where it is. He's just trying to get his ass to go as quick as he can to get out of the pit lane, and Sargent's going full pelt. So it's a double-edged sword in that Sargent broke the rule, but did he really know he was doing it? Yeah, I found it totally bizarre, that penalty. Anyway, overall, I'll give the race about 3.5 out of 5. I didn't think it was too bad. Max won, of course, but that was to be expected. Now, the big talking point. I know I bang on about this every time I sit here at the desk. Lance Stroll. I mean, my God, what are they going to do with him? I've had people write comments that it was a racing incident. It wasn't his fault. Lance got on the radio and called Ricciardo an idiot. The dickhead move was on Stroll because he is in the train of cars coming into that corner. They're under a safety car. They're not going full pelt. Piastri's there. Ricciardo's there. Stroll's coming up behind Ricciardo. Now, as it shows from the onboard, Stroll's already started to look through the corner, through the right-hand side of the tub and the halo, and he's not keeping his eyes on the car in front. Now, I've been to a lot of car accidents in my career, and the driver who runs up the arse of the car in front and gives them the Liberace treatment is the driver at fault. There's no two ways about it. You can't get out of it. Stroll can say all he wants that he was brake tested by Ricciardo. Utter bullshit. I've never heard more bullshit from a driver. Lance was at fault. End of story. He got a 10-second penalty, which I don't think was enough. He's got to accept the blame for it. And Ricciardo did nothing wrong. Ricciardo's, obviously run up the back of Piastri because his car's been lifted in the air. He can't go anywhere. He's just a passenger. But Stroll has got to watch the car in front of him. Yes, you can glance to the corner, but you've got to watch the car in front because that thing in front of you will ultimately cause damage to your car, which it did in him getting a new nose fitted. So that's me whinging about Stroll again. It's on record. I don't like the bloke. I think he's a shit driver. I think he's just a seat warmer. His old man's got to man up. And Lawrence has got to say, son, it's time to go. I'm going to put another driver in the seat for Miami. or potentially another couple of races, so you can go away and sort your head out. Now, of course, it was a big weekend for Guan Yu Zhou. It was his home race, and huge crowds turned up. His 7,500 seat stadium, they believe, sold out in 4 minutes. So huge crowd, huge support for Zhou. As a local bloke, he's a Shanghai boy. He's come home to race in his hometown, and he did well, literally to drag that Sauber around. It wasn't the best result he wanted. I mean, some people have been critical, say, why did he get his own, car market podium, bollard, whatever you want to call it. But I think it was just fitting for the Chinese crowd to have the first Chinese driver in F1. I know Ming tried years ago in the Caterham just for a test session, but that doesn't really count. But I mean, Zhou's actually been racing for a couple of seasons now, and I think it was just a nice fitting thing for him to be able to park his car in front of his home crowd and acknowledge their presence and support for him. Now, the other talking point is the FIA are going to sit down with the teams and review the points allocation system. Now, I don't know why they want to change it. I think they stuffed it up when they changed it back in 2010 to go to the top 10 from 25 points down to 1. I mean, obviously, we go back in time from 91 to 03, it was the top 6, and you got points for 10 points, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Then in 2003, they went to the top 8, kept it at 10 points, and just went down from there. Now, there is just some discussion they're going to go to the top 12 that finished the race. I think it's a joke. I think they need to go back to the old system that they had up until 2003, which was the top 6. When going back to the 90s when I was watching these races, they had 24 cars fighting out for the top 6. But if you go for the top 12, why don't we just give everyone a participation medal for turning up and saying, hey, little Johnny, you did well today. It's like it's an under-7s rugby game. At the end of the season, everyone gets a medal for having a go. It's just pointless. It's just utter shit that the FIA are even contemplating changing this. They need to go back to the top 6, narrow down the scope of the points, so that we don't see drivers getting massive leads in the championship. That just makes it, by the middle of the season, the championship's over because they've won a gazillion points and nobody can catch them. I think you've got to tighten it up, go back to the top 6, from 10 to 1, and make it easier or more narrow the leadership that one driver can have over the second and third place getter in the championship overall. I think it's a joke. Anyway, I think it's just either leave as it is or go back to the old system. Don't make it even bigger. Just waste of time. Right, so our next race is Miami, and as you can see, I'm overexcited to be watching it again. So that's it for this edition of DURKO's Notebook. I thank you for watching. So Jen, and see you in a couple of weeks' time for the Miami Notebook. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.